Hey guys, it's Amy at zoeleebeck, and I'm going to do my 500 subscribers Q&A. So, I got quite a few questions. Thank you very much for everybody who participated and put down their questions. I will also have my giveaway probably in the second part of this. I'm going to split it up because it's going to be long because I talk a lot and well, I don't know how long this is actually going to turn out to be, but I'm just going to split it. So there'll be two. So the second one will have the winner in it, just so you know. So anyway, I'm going to go through, I've listed out all the questions, and I'm going to do them. I've kind of put them in some kind of an order. Some might backtrack a little bit, but I've put them in kind of into groups. Some of them I've split up, so some of your questions will be in one group, and then I'll mention another question from you later, just because it switches it around. So anyway, I tried to keep most of those together. So today, this one's going to be mostly about books and reading, and then we'll see how far I get. Maybe it'll be another section or two. But for sure, we're going to start with the books, because this is a booktube channel. So I'm going to read, I guess I have a little cheat sheet. So if I look down, that's what I'm looking at. So Charmaine Salaba, I think is how it said, asks, if you have to pick one genre as your favorite, which would you choose? I think it's pretty obvious. Fantasy in some form or other is going to be my favorite. I read pretty much every type of fantasy that there is in the adult realm, and that's my favorite. Anything with a paranormal element, something speculative, I'm in on it. Science fiction is, so I could say speculative kind of covers everything, but I guess I'm more on the fantasy than on science fiction, even though I like science fiction a lot. I guess that's what I want to say. But I'm going to say fantasy, even though speculative would cover even more stuff, but we're going to go with fantasy. That's the genre I would say is my favorite. And then Anjali Nanda asks, which books are your favorite? Did you always like books? So, which books are my favorite? Oh my gosh, we could be here all day if we went through this. I do have a top 10 list that I made last June? If I find the video, I'll link it down below, which does actually say which are my 10 top books. But I'm gonna say, just because the next question, another person has a next question of what's my favorite classic, is actually my favorite book of all time. So I'll get to that question in a minute. So, but the question is, the other question is, did you always like books? I would say I did. I was not a huge reader as a child. I did read, don't get me wrong, but I didn't have, like, I had one friend who was a passionate reader. She read much more than I did and much more advanced. I had some issues with reading due to the fact that I memorized all the words that I read. I can't sound out any words. I had earaches all the way through second grade, so I didn't hear a whole lot. So I read a little differently than maybe some people. So, but I read a lot of the books that I had, that I was a big reader even as a kid. And so I would say I was always a reader, just I didn't read as much as I did as I got older. But anyway, I would say that I was a reader. Angela 405 asked me, what is your favorite classic of all time? And again, this is, as I said, one of my books, the favorite, because again, a lot of people asked about my favorite books. Classic favorite book of all time is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I don't think this is any surprise. I think a lot of people, it is their favorite book of all time, but it is really my favorite book of all time. So again, this is just fantastic all the way around. I reread it again this last year. I've read it, I don't know, I've read it, I don't even know how many times. I've read it quite a few times. Like, actually, I can't count anymore. I don't read it every year, that's for sure, but I do read it every few years, and I've always enjoyed it and always got more out of it, and I just continue to love this book, and I will read it forever and ever and ever. Because it's my favorite book of all time. And nothing has displaced that in, 20-some years, so I can't, so that's how that goes. Okay, so Angela's 405's other question was, where's a good place to start with paranormal? So I picked several series just to kind of throw out different options for you. I, of course, am always going to suggest Nalini Singh, either this series or the Side Changing series. This is the Guild Hunter series. Both of them are long series, so if you want to get into a long series, but both of them are great world building. If you like any kind of fantasy or anything like that, I would definitely choose Nalini Singh. She has great character development. A lot of characters. Again, there's because it's paranormal romance, the couples change. Not so much in the Guild Hunter series, but in the Side Changeling, it's mostly a different couple in each book, which I like, and the stories build on each other, which is great. Anyway, I like those ones. I would also suggest Thea Harrison with Dragonbound. This is the Elder Race series. I believe there are 10. I think there's 10. I think there's 10 in this series, and I've read them all, and they're all really good. And again, this is like, as I said, it has all the urban fantasy elements that I like, but it's a paranormal because it does follow. I think is it 2 books that are on the main couple? Oh no, I don't think so. I think they are all separate ones. No, I remember. Sorry, I'm already messing up on this, but don't worry. Anyway, this one's another good one. I think this world building is really good, and there's a short series at 10 books, but you know what I mean. A lot of series goes on, and I think it's a good place to start. I think it's her writing is really well done, and it's an easy world to get into with the elder races and the humans and all that stuff. A funny one for vampires is to go the Argano series, vampire series by Lindsay Sands. These are hilarious, and they build on each other. There are 20 some of these too. Sorry. And I've only read, I think, 13, so I need to get back into this series as well. But I think this is a good place to start, as it's fun and not as dark and deep as some other ones. I think it's a fun one. And then if you want crazy, zany, just insane, I would go with Shirley Lawrenston. Again, I loved the Call of Crows series. It's only a trilogy, but it has to do with like Norse mythology. It's just craziness. So those are a few options I would say for paranormal. Wow. Okay. Recommendations within my Q&A. How fun. Anyway, J.E. Crow asks, who is your favorite fictional character or fictional ensemble? So I picked 2 that are both ensemble because I don't know. I don't know if I have like I love certain characters. I mean, there's people I can pull up books that I just love that character. But of my favorites, I would say an ensemble, the Other series by Anne Bishop. This is one of my favorite ensemble casts ever. Just urban fantasy, just great. Because we follow Meg and Simon mostly, but who are the main characters. But there's so many other people, and they're all build throughout the 5 books in this series. I just love this series overall for so many different reasons. But the ensemble cast is one of the best. And then my other favorite I'm going to say is the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn series. If I want to go epic fantasy, Simon is one of my favorite characters of all time, but it really is his coming of age story. And again, with epic fantasy and so much stuff going on, I love that series. And so I would also say that the cast, because all the characters in there that we follow, I really love. And so that is another one for ensemble cast. Okay. And then J.E. Crow also asks who is my favorite author. So this is really hard. So again, I have favorite books and then authors. There's certain authors that I really, really love. But I would say right now my favorite author is Nalini Singh. She is the author I've read the most from, I believe, of all the books. I've read a lot of books of a lot of different writers, but she's the most prolific of the ones I've read and completed, pretty much by far. I've read a lot of Simon R. Green too, but I don't know. I've read a lot of her books, especially recently in the last 5 or 6 years. And as soon as I get a book of hers, I usually read it. It's very rare that I hold one. Now, on her contemporary romance series, I do sometimes wait. I do have 1 book left to read in that series. But usually when I get her books, I read them almost immediately. And I would say she gives me, like, I always enjoy her books. There's only been a few books I've even been kind of about. And I really just love her. And I would say she's my favorite author right now. And again, she writes paranormal romances mostly, and then she's just gotten into thrillers, which are not my favorite, but again, they're contemporary thrillers, which is my little problem. And then the contemporary romance, again, I like them, but I just can't read them that much. Again, contemporary. Anyway, but I love her. Anyway, Spring Into Reading asks, what American classics have you read? So I am woefully behind on reading American classics. I need to focus a little bit more on this. I've been doing so much because of Victober and all of those that I've really got a lot of, and even some international classics. I've gotten some more of those. But American classics I'm not very good at. I mean, I've read several Hemingways, and I read all of F. Scott Fitzgerald's novels, except for maybe one. I have to check. I keep thinking I forgot one. And then, of course, I loved Harper Lee in the To Kill a Mockingbird. And I feel like I've kind of neglected. I would like to try several others, like Hawthorne's on my list to try. I haven't read him before. I didn't have to study him in school. And there was somebody else. I did read Moby Dick, but I would not say that was a favorite. Anyway, but I have read that one. So I need to find an American classics list, and if you guys know of a list somewhere that I should look into, I realized that I don't have quite as many as I thought I did, and I need to read more. Literary. Then the next asks is, do you ever annotate your books or use any particular note-taking method while reading? And no, I'm not. Not since college has I really annotated any of my books. I do occasionally tab my book, like if there's like something important happens on a certain page and I want to remember where it happened in the book, I will tab it, but I don't even mark in the book what it is. It's just a tab like on the side so I can see, hey, something happened here that I want to remember. And I don't do it very often. Like, it's amazing if I have more than 2 in a book. Like, if I have that many, that book either surprised me a lot or I hated it a lot, or I mean, I might have loved it a lot too, but I don't usually annotate very much. I really don't. I do write little reviews for myself on a Word sheet or Word document now in the last couple of years, so I could go back and read what I thought about the book, and I get a little synopsis. So I usually write down the synopsis and how I felt about it, but really I don't annotate my books very often at all. So Sarah asks, what got you interested in reading? Has it been a lifelong passion? And so I'll combine these two. So I don't, like, again, I was exposed to reading very early. And I always read. I don't think I read a whole lot when I was young, but I did read. Like, there were definitely times where we were supposed to have quiet time and I was supposed to read. So my parents definitely focused us on that. And I did enjoy that, and I read a lot. I don't know if it was a lifelong passion until I got into my I would say my preteens. I would say about middle school is really where it kicked off, because I think I finally got over some of the reading issues I had in grade school, because they finally kind of said, hey, we need to help you with this a little bit and get better at your reading comprehension. And whatever those classes I took, that helped, because now I read a lot more and understand a lot better. So I don't know. I think after that is when I discovered different kinds of books in my in middle school that really changed, that I would say I became a real reader. Again, I liked that stuff when I was a kid, but it wasn't quite the same. I don't know. But I would say, since I've been reading the whole time, it's not like I never didn't like to read. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It became more of a passion later, at least when I became 11 or 12 and stuff like that. She also asked, what types of books do you enjoy the most? Fantasies are pretty much my favorite, between epic fantasy, paranormal romance, urban fantasy. Those are my favorites. Like, I like series. I need to read more of them. But I do enjoy books that have a lot of plot, I guess I admit it. But I also like big ensemble casts, like I've mentioned. I do really like that kind of stuff. So books that have big casts, those are my favorite kind of books. So I mean, again, I don't have a problem when there's only a few people in a book like that. I can deal with that too. That's not a problem. But the books that really pull me in and really hold my attention are books that have big ensembles and that the world feels real. Not real as in like reality. I meant as in, even if it's a fantasy world, it makes sense in some way. The magic makes sense. The world, the history of that world makes sense of something that happened in the past or what's going to happen in the future. Kind of, I don't know. It has to be, it has to be fun. Those are usually what I enjoy. Do you enjoy classics the most? No, I really like classics, and I'm really glad that I'm getting to some classics that I didn't get to in college when I studied, when I got my bachelorette. But, and I love finding new authors that, yeah, I've heard about them, but I've never read their books, or continuing on in some series or some books that I haven't read by them before. So, I mean, again, I still explore classics. I like finding new ones. And I definitely need to work on my American, though, because clearly that's a little lacking. So we'll work on that. But I would not say that was, again, I don't think it's my favorite, but I definitely have a drive to read more classics due to my college degree. Anyway. And then, do you have any super underrated recommendations? So, I don't know. I guess, I mean, my biggest thing, I didn't pull a book, but, you know, like, I know that through BookTube, a lot of people discovered Mary Stuart. Now, I loved Mary Stuart when I was in my teens. My mom and my grandmothers all read her. And so I got their old used books, and I read those all in my teens. Loved all the Mary Stuart books. Those are my favorite. Victoria Holt was huge. Like, so, I did pull one of hers. So again, I love her. I think she's very underrated for historical romance, historical fiction. She does a lot of those. I just adore all these. They're gothic in some of them, and some of them they're just mysteries. Some of them are just, but a lot of them are historical. But I really like those. I think they're very underrated. Nobody talks about them, and I think they're just wonderful. I think those would be my most underrated. Most other things I think are pretty popular that people know about. I don't know. I guess if you want to go horror, I would say Brian Lumley is one of my favorite horror novelists that I read when I was a teenager. Yes, I took this to school. And I loved reading these books when I was in high school. It was just because nobody could believe I read them. And I'm like, hey. Anyway, but these are vampire horror novels, and they're so epic. The series is huge, and I just love the first 6 books. I think it's 6. No, 5. No, 5. 5 is the first series, and then 3 in the next series, so 8 books. Wonderful. Anyway, I think they're underrated. I don't know if anybody talks about Necroscope but me in any capacity, because I haven't read him in years, as I said, but I still have his books, because I do plan to reread those at some point. Anyway, I would say those are my underrated. I'm sure there's others. I can't think of any off the top of my head. Sylvia Anderson asks, do you have a book that is a favorite that you have read many times? So I'll just show this since we've knocked books off. The India Fan by Victoria Holt is a book that I've read more times than I can count. I actually have no idea how many times I've read this book since my teens. I think it came out in, was it 88? 88. So I didn't find it until probably 90, 91. I don't remember. It was somewhere in there. And then I have reread this book. As I said, I read this many times, several times that first year, and then every year I read it at least once for decades. And then I think just in the last 10 years, I kind of calmed down, and I haven't read it quite as often. I did reread it last year, which was an excellent reread. It's just it's so much nostalgia, but also I just love this book about a woman who, in the 1800s, who she is the rector's daughter, but she is pulled to the Framing, Framling family lives next door, and they're kind of the, you know, the lord and lady kind of thing. And then so she gets pulled to play with their daughter, and of course she has kind of a episode with the older son, and then it's when they're kids, and then when they're young women, and then when they're a little bit older, and she gets to go to India to be a governess. So it's just I love this book. Anyway, sorry. So let's see if I might have to pick those books up. No, hopefully not. Okay. So Basilius asked, what is your favorite books of all time? As I said, I have a video on that. I'll try to link that down below. What are 3 favorite classics published over 100 years ago? Yeah, I know it's an arbitrary demarcation. So again, you know, Pride and Prejudice is definitely #1 of my classics of all time. And yeah, it's on there. My other favorite, the other 2 that I would classify as my favorite, The Three Musketeers by Alexander Dumas is by far one of my favorites. Again, I read this also as a teen. That is still, I've read this like 4 times. I do love this. If I could only make it through the rest of the series. Right now I'm having trouble, but I love this book. I read this so many times. I love this book. And my other one would be another Jane Austen. I know that seems kind of weird, but it is my other favorite of her books that I have reread more times than I can count. And so I love all these books. These are my favorite classics of all time. Okay. So CV, asked, I think this also asked who is my favorite author. As I said, amazing. Novel Novels asks is what was your favorite childhood book? So this one I've never owned this book. But this is definitely, let's see if it's gonna show it. I don't know. My favorite book as a child was The Boxcar Children by Gertrude Chandler Warner. And this was definitely my favorite. Now, I did not have this copy. Like, I think this is a Scholastic one. I don't know. But we had a bind up of the first 3 in a red hardback that didn't have any, and it didn't, only said The Boxcar Children on the side. So I actually didn't know it was like a bind up until many years later. But we had the first 3 books in that. And I read that book over a dozen times between, I think I was 6 or 7. I think I always remember it in 2nd grade, but I don't remember what year I started it. But all the way through 5th grade, which is our grade school, I read it multiple times. And you could see, because it had one of those little cards in it, you could see how many times I checked it out over the years. And the librarian was always like, wouldn't you like to check something else out? I'm like, no, I want to read that one again. I loved this series as a kid. And I have never revisited it since middle school or from grade school because I read it so much then. At the time I knew it so well, and I never owned it my own copy, and I don't know why, but I got it from that library for so many times. But I would say that was my favorite childhood book, and I would be and again, I read it over and over. Her other question was what also was a book that you wanted to pick up over and over, and that would be the one I picked up all the time. Anyway, I think that's what she meant. And so this is said, never owned it, but I did like that. And Lisa Justice also asked is what was the first book you remember loving? This is the first book I remember. I know I had books that were at home and like those little I don't know, they were like little like triangle-ish or not rectangle little books that you got like in the mail, like a couple in the mail. Like we had the Richard Scarry and some of the other ones. I don't remember what they called those ones. And I remember I read those over and over and over. But I would say the first book that I loved was The Boxcar Children. I think it was just fantastic to me. These poor kids who went to live in the boxcar. Anyway, anyway, but that was, again, that's my first memory of what book I really loved. Let's see here. Bibliophile's Journey asks is if you could read 2 books for the first time, what would you choose? So, the first one would be Pride and Prejudice. If I got to reread this and have it be like the first time, it would be this one because I have no memory of the first time I read this. This sounds really weird because for a book that is my favorite book of all time. I don't have a definitive memory of when I actually read this in high school. I know I did, and I didn't read it for class. I read it on my own. But I have no memory of the actual experience. I just know that then I reread it the next year, and I read it the next year, and again, I studied a lot about it in college, so I read it several times in college. So I know that I read this a lot. I just don't have the memory of the first time. And it really hurts me that I don't remember that. And I have a really horrible memory anyway, but it's so sad that I don't remember that. I would love this to be the book that I would reread. I mean, and have it be like the first time I read it and like get that whole experience back. I mean, I get something out of it every time I read it, but it's so sad I don't remember it. The other one would be Silver Silence by Nalini Singh. As I said, she's my favorite author right now, but this is my favorite book. I love this book. I read this like 2 or 3 times a year since this came out in 2017, I believe. Yeah, 2017. I've read this 2 to 3 times every year. I think 3, yeah, 2 to 3 times every year. I just love this book. This is one of my favorites. But I would love to reread it, like, have that feeling of what that first time read. Because I remember back in 2017 when I read this, when I was caught up on the series and this book came out, it was like it was just a little bit after I'd finally caught up with the series, and oh, it was just so fantastic. I would love to reread it. Isn't that bad? I don't know. I love that. Anyway, let's see here. Where was I at? So those are the ones I would reread. Read and find out. Ask, what books would you use to represent who you are as a person? So this was really hard because my favorite books are fantasy most of the time, and I don't want to live those lives. I just like to follow the characters there. But I would say Linus in The House in the Cerulean Sea. Not everything about him, but the fact that his middle-agedness and his ordinariness in the beginning, you know, like, and where kind of, some of it was a little too close to home for me, but I also felt really seen in a lot of ways. And again, he is one of my favorite characters of all time now, but I love him. And if I had to pick a book that, you know, it would be nice if I had a nice little happiness in my life like Linus gets in the end, I would like that too. Anyway, I love Linus. Anyway, but that's the only book I could think of that most of the books I read are, you know, as I said, they're not my life, luckily. Let's put it that way. Hannah's Books asks, I would like to hear about a book or two that you loved as a child. Have you reread it as an adult? So, I didn't quite take this as one of the books that fell. I didn't take this as the childhood book. I decided to go with a different book just to say, because this is the book that I read in middle school that was like the most defining book. And again, I think I had a video about the first adult book that I read, and I'll link that video down below as well. And then there were none by Agatha Christie. Pretty much blew my mind and took me in a direction in my reading to more anything with a mystery. Mysteries were my first love of books, I think, when it comes to after, you know, from middle school on. As much as I liked horror and fantasy and other things, mysteries were the basis. As long as there was a mystery in the story, I was in love with it. As long as it had something going on that we had to figure out something, I loved it. And again, I started with Agatha Christie at about 12. I was given this book by my teacher because I was, again, learning to read trying to read differently. And we had to read so many books. Well, I read like 4 Agatha Christie's that year, but the first one I was suggested to pick up was And Then There Were None. So, does that say something about how my reading went afterwards? Just because I started with a mystery where they're killing off people on this island? I don't know. But it is one of those books that I have reread several times. I love it every time. It's definitely one of my favorite books. It came to me at a time when it showed me the world kind of opened up to a lot of different other books because of this book. So it is, as I said, one of my favorite books, and definitely one I would consider still in my childhood since I picked it up at 12. So anyway, and made such a difference in my life. So I like that one. And then the last one I'm going to do for this section of the Q&A is, Banks asks, did you have your bookshelves custom built? Your shelf height seems to be so perfect for the size of your books, or did you add shelves to an existing Billy bookcase? So Billy bookcases are, again, from IKEA. Yes, almost all my bookcases are from IKEA. Most of them are the Billy bookcases. I added 2 shelves on every one except for one of them over here. So I have 7 bookcases in here that are like this, and I did them all with the smaller, because at the time I had a lot of mass markets. Now I have a lot more trades, so I'm kind of mad at myself. I put them all this way. I should probably switch back one of them at least to have more, take out one of the shelves and realign them, but I just haven't done that yet. So, but most of the time I have I added shelves. So they're Billy bookcases. Anyway, so that is the first section of my Q&A. If this goes a lot longer, this might be 3 parts. We'll see. But that's part 1. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I will be back with part 2 in a couple of days. Okay? Or another day. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, I will talk to you guys later. Bye.